Oh, here.
Yeah, what's happening, everybody? This is Pastor Dixon. I'm over here with my good friend Carol Temple and her husband George at a meet and greet as Carol begins her formal campaign to represent the good people of South Carolina House District 115. House District 115. Listen, I don't know who you might support, but I absolutely know who I'm going to support. Without a doubt, unequivocally, Carol Temple for House District 115. Hear ye her.
For all of you being here, it really means a lot to me because I feel connected to each and every one of you. So I thank you so much for being here because I really want to go to the State House. Yeah.
We want you to go.
So it means a lot. So I want to first say thank you. I have to thank my family. I have to thank George. You know, he is the wind beneath my wings. Hey, George. Thomas and I were just talking about how important a spouse is to a campaign because campaigns are like this. And George is always it's like this, and pops me up again and pushes me on. So, and that's been happening for a long time, so it means a lot. My son Aaron is here. He's supportive. When somebody makes a negative comment on Facebook, he's like, so you know, in terms of I want to thank those of you who brought contributions of food. Yesterday, Penny Davis and Maria Steve were here in the kitchen with me, and we whipped together some things. Judy Manning brought the beautiful blueberry and French toast, and Cynthia made chocolate macaroons. And Mary Hamill, who's not here, brought some chicken and mac and cheese. So it really means a lot to have the support of all of you and family. So, you know, people talk about, you know, why do you run? And so I was just trying to think about it, and George says, well, tell your story. And I said, which one? Which one should I talk about? The equality justice one, the educational justice one, the criminal justice one, the environmental justice one. So I have lots of stories, but I'm going to talk about education this morning. And I hope that as I tell my story, that you can see some of the things that drive my passion and the issues that I will be responsive to. Because I believe that when somebody runs for public office, they're running because it's part of their story. It's a part of their very being. So here's my story. It's a family story. I don't know that I've told it very much. But anyway, I was born in Chicago, and I lived with a working class family. My parents had a home in Chicago. We were just in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath home with a basement that periodically flooded and caused disasters to the family at times, especially when my mom finally got her new washing machine and it got drenched. So, you know, both of my parents were not able to finish high school. They both had to go to work to support their families because their families were not very wealthy. My dad's family came from Poland. My grandfather worked in the steel mills. My grandmother worked as a maid. And I'm just in awe that at age 16, she came from Poland all by herself to this country for a better life. So when I think about her, I know that it's really important that the work that I do is not only for my family, but it's for the generations that follow, and my fellow citizens. I feel strongly about that. So my dad worked in a factory, and I have to think about him in the sense that he wasn't too proud to go along the railroad tracks in our neighborhood to pick up coal and throw it into the furnace. And many a time when there was construction going on, he went to those construction sites, and sometimes he had me go and ask. I didn't like that part of it. But you know, sometimes it was just a leftover bucket of cement or some pieces of wood that he could use to fix the house. So that's my dad. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she, you know, she was an encourager. Like, she would talk about, you know, you can do anything you want, and she would talk about the time when she was trying to get a job because she was working in the 25 cents in the pillow factory, and her mom was such that said, oh no, don't go for a new job, you know, stick with what you have. And my mother had real gumption, and she went and got herself a job at Montgomery Ward in the bookkeeping area. So Mom was a gardener, and she sewed all of our clothes. When I was young, everything was handmade except our underwear, and shoes. So my parents they knew the importance of education. So when I was in 8th grade, teachers pulled my parents aside to tell them that I should go to college. So I'll never forget, my dad turned to my mom and said, Ad, you got to start saving money. Girls are going to college. And then Dad turned to me and said, and you're getting a job in the shop. And you have to understand that at this point in time, only the boys who were going to college got a job in the shop. So my dad sticking up for me was a big deal, and I think that's one of the things that put me onto the road of women's equality. So that's my story. That's my parents' influence on me, and I know that yes, I did get a good education. I do have a doctoral degree, and I feel that education was so important to me to be able to support myself till I got married, and then support George and I supporting our family together was important. And I was able to have a career that gave me a living wage, that provided me with health care and retirement benefits, and allows me to live in this safe and beautiful environment. So those are the things I hope you hear in my story, you know, things that matter to me and things that I think are important to others. So now I want to pivot a little bit to saying, you know, most of you are pretty familiar with me and know that I ran for the House seat last year and got 49% of the vote. So that's pretty significant for a Democrat these days. And we know from the research that it really takes 2 good cycles of running as a Democrat in South Carolina to get elected. And that's why I feel strongly that I need to run. So often candidates run, people work their heart out, and then they disappear. And I want you to know I haven't disappeared. I still have the same passion and gumption to run again. So, and I feel that not only is the name recognition important, but in the process you build a cadre of supporters and volunteers, which is important, and you build a network of people both locally, people and organizations both locally and statewide. And I really appreciate that in my last campaign I received the endorsement from the South Carolina Education Association, and believe me, those people are picky about who they endorse. Planned Parenthood, the AFL-CIO, and the Working Families. So this year, I knew I wanted to run again, but this year, I didn't want to start the campaign so early. I'll tell you why in a minute. So how have I spent my time in 2019? So I've made some bullets, because it's sometimes hard to figure out and remember everything that happens. So I've testified in the legislature on education, and I've rallied with the teachers at the State House. I was amongst the 10,000 people who were there at the State House to show that teachers have voice and teachers need voice. I've worked with the Charleston Area Justice Ministry on issues like transportation, affordable housing, early childhood education, school climate and discipline, and lobbied for the police audit for racial bias. I've worked with the Quality Education Project. Jesse here, raise your hand. And I have been dragged into this.
I want to speak about that later if you can.
Advocating to save the trades at Garrett Academy, because we know that the trades that are offered at schools like Garrett are entry points for so many kids into the middle class, and that's what we need, ways to get people into the middle class so they can afford their housing, afford their health care, and have a quality of life. With the Quality Education Project, we also visited high poverty schools in Atlanta in an attempt to try to see what are those high poverty schools doing there that helps them achieve, so we can bring it back to us here in Charleston and in South Carolina. And also, along with several of my QEP members like Thomas Dixon here, we exposed the dark money that was prevalent in the last school board election. And I've worked to try to mobilize women to secure our ability to make our own decisions about our health without government interference. And, you know, one of my pet projects is to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed in South Carolina. I'm thinking, yoo-hoo, Virginia! Might make it easier for us. So, like you, I've attended the hearings, I've signed the petitions, wrote the letters on issues we care about, but it's important to be involved in the process. So what's the timeline for the election? Kind of why I'm starting early here. Well, first of all, we do anticipate that Peter McCoy may be appointed U.S. Attorney. And if that happens, that's going to require a special election. And once he announces that and resigns, it's a short 6-week period to get elected. So we have to be prepared, if we're sincere about trying to flip this seat and have more women, more educators, more Democrats in the State House. So that's one issue. Don't officially file for the State House until March, but we have to be ready sooner. I'm also anticipating a June primary because there's a person who wants to begin her political career. So that's going to be interesting. And then finally, the general election will be in November of 2020. So here's what I can contribute to the legislature. First of all, I believe that I can make a difference in people's lives. If I didn't believe that, I couldn't run for this office. I know education is necessary to support a robust economy and provide better jobs. That's essential. I fully understand the needs of K through 12 education. Many of you in this room who know that I was a classroom teacher, I was served on the school board, I was a curriculum specialist for math, science, and technology, and I served as administrator, as assistant principal and principal of the schools. So I understand this whole organization of how schools operate and what needs to happen. So I'm also a scientist. I don't know if some of you know that, but I majored in biology. So I understand, you know, what the impact of climate change is on our environment. And I understand about our health when we're what it means to be healthy and why that's important. And I'm a problem solver. I think many of you know that I know how to take action, I know how to network with others, and I know how change happens, and I like making change. I like the dirty work of making change. All right, so 3 things that I'm going to do during my campaign. People always say, what are 3 things you're going to do here? All right, so here's what I'm going to do during the campaign. I'm going to continue to advocate on existing bills that are related to issues I've mentioned today, including the Equal Rights Amendment. And there are bills in the legislature that deal with pay and renewable energy, all those kinds of issues. So I have a whole list of what those bills are, and I track on them, and I will advocate, and when I need your help or think that we all can be voices to it, I will let you know. And I'm going to lobby with the teachers to continue to advocate for educational reform. There's a bill in the Senate that needs a lot of attention right now to promote adequate school funding. We had a conversation with Tammy about that. That's serious. We need to lower class size. We're burning out our teachers. When we lose 5,000 teachers a year in South Carolina, we have a problem, and we have to address it. And we need to increase teacher pay. It's not right that our teachers are working 2 and 3 extra jobs during the school year to make ends meet. That's not what we should be doing. And also, we need to really ensure that our schools have the resources they need for a quality public education. And we need to get away from this idea that privatizing our public schools will be better. That is the disaster for us. And of course, I'm going to campaign to win. With your help. So, what are 3 critical issues? People say, well, what are you going to do when you get there? That need to be accomplished sooner than later. Well, we need to modernize our educational funding. I mean, when George and I look at the budgets and they tell us how much money is spent on education, we're like, okay, someone says it's $11,000 or $12,000, and then we look at the money that our schools receive on James Island, it's only $7,000. So it's so hard to track it. We have to modernize our funding for schools and prioritize it. It should be the first thing that we fund in the state budget, and it's not. All these other projects get funded before we fund education, and today we read that we're each getting a $50 check, which could have been used to get buses for our kids.
That's right.
And the cost of writing that $50 check is outrageous. And we have to get rid of this idea that we are a minimally adequate thinking state on education. The other thing that I think is really important is that we have to appoint an independent commission for redistricting and end the gerrymandering. And that's going to be critical right now, because between 2020 now and 2022 with the census, we have to address that. And I will sign on to bills that address the important issues, and I will work to promote public awareness of those bills so that they get passed. That's one thing that I think our legislators don't do very well, is to publicize that. So as I posted on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, I'm running to be in the legislature to influence legislation from within rather than from the sidelines. And I ask for your vote. I ask for your investment of time, your talent, and your treasure. And I am sure that I will communicate with you, and I am sure that we can win this race together. So thank you so much. So please continue.